Next up, we have Sami Kizilbash, who's been a Googler since 2012. Early on in his career, he helped lead the company's market entry into South Asia. So big thank you to Sami. Sami currently oversees Google's developer relations ecosystem team across South and Southeast Asia. And he's a co-founder of Google's global indie games Accelerator and the developer space at Google Singapore. A big warm welcome for Sami.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing? All right. Well, my name is Sami, and I'm quite honored to be here near the end of our 021 experience. It's been a pretty incredible last 2 days. I look after Google's regional developer relations team, as mentioned, and I'm based in Singapore, where we have our APAC headquarters. My team's mission is to help startups and developers succeed, ideally by supporting some of the incredible talent, most of which is in this room today, and accelerating our tech ecosystems around the region. I've had the pleasure of working together with Jahan and the NestIO team for many years. Dating back to, firstly, the Google for Startups program that we worked on many years ago, building up our GDG Kolachi team over the last few years. In fact, I think maybe Eric and Haris are somewhere out here, our community leaders. If you're a software developer, they run incredible tech events, some at the NestIO event space, and also they've got one coming up in a few weeks you should check out. We also worked together most recently on our Powered by Launchpad Startup Accelerator partnership, which we announced a year ago here. So it's been exciting. And as a Pakistani that grew up in Karachi, I just have to say that I'm just so grateful and honored and proud of being a part of this journey, and just so proud of Jahan and the work that NestIO has done. And I'd love to just give them another round of applause for all of this. This is my first time here, but it's just incredible. For today's event, I chose a talk that is a little bit different in the sense that I'm not going to be speaking to all the aspiring entrepreneurs, but maybe some of you intrapreneurs. So this one is for the folks who are trying to get big ideas done in big companies. So can I just hear a shout of all the people who are in a large company right now? Or hands, or shout, I'll take both. That's a lot of hands, so all of you in banks and telcos, government organizations, FMCG, I'm talking to you. This one is for you. And I'll try to keep it short. I'll give you a little bit of context on this talk. This is the second time I'm giving this talk, and the first time I'm actually sharing it outside of Google. It was designed for actually some junior members of my global team to help them understand how to build their big ideas, get them off the ground at Google. So it was really designed for that context. But after I developed the story, I realized, hey, this kind of sounds like that word I've heard, which is intrapreneurship, and maybe it's relevant for those of you out there who are also in very large organizations. So I do have a disclaimer, okay? And the disclaimer is that I'm not an expert in this field whatsoever. So yeah, just be careful about that. This is not an official Google content presentation. Totally my personal perspective after 7 years at Google, and as an entrepreneur before that. I'm a fellow corporate warrior, like many of you, and have experience with failure and some success. And hopefully you learn a thing, one new thing, or maybe a good reminder for something that can help you. But if you follow this advice and you get fired for being a pain in your management's balance sheet, then look, you can't hold me or Google liable. Okay, so that's the disclaimer. And so we begin. This story has 3 chapters, essentially. The first one I'll be talking about is on the road to LGTM. Do you all know what LGTM stands for? Yes? The other Googler raises their hand. Okay, LGTM looks good to me. It's a term that's used quite a bit in software development for an approval. It's that coveted approval that you get, software developers get, when their code change list gets approved by senior developers. Anyways, in the context of this, it's essentially saying that you got validation, you got the approval for your budget and resources for that big idea that you had. It's the equivalent of being an entrepreneur and landing your seed funding or whatever it is that's needed to get off the ground. So that's the first chapter. Second one is putting the idea into action. And the third one, chapter 3 on legacies and failures, is going to be a short epilogue. So let's get started, shall we? Yes, on the road to the LGTM. Your idea. I'm not going to talk about how to come up with ideas. I believe everyone in this room knows how to come up with ideas. I will set some parameters for this discussion. Essentially, when I think about an idea, and a lot of people I work with, they think about it as being a solution to a problem. I'm sure, like many of you, people on my team will pitch me ideas, and I'm struggling to find out what does it solve. What does it solve? The best ideas solve a problem, and you might see this often. Now, there are some problems that can be solved on our own as individuals. And in your individual contributor, for all those people who raise their hands and work in large enterprises, in your own individual contributor, context, you might be able to get it done. That's not what this presentation is about. We're going to be talking about problems that are more complex. And when you have more complex problems in a large organization, I've learned over time from being in a 3, 4, 5-person startup to joining what is now a 100,000-person organization, that there is a lot of coordination involved, right? So, one of the first things I've learned is when I've got an idea that I think has some merit, that solves a problem that's complex, I try to find the stakeholders that might be out there that could help. And there's different types of stakeholders. Some are internal, some are external. Nest.io has been one of our most valuable external stakeholders that we've had in Pakistan. And Google for Startups is another team inside of Google that is a very valuable internal stakeholder for me. All right? So you may have your own. There's also active versus passive. An active stakeholder is a team that needs to be involved in your planning every day, in and out, maybe at your weekly meetings, maybe they're involved in approval processes and so on. A passive stakeholder might just need to get an FYI every now and then, an update, maybe they're a senior stakeholder, maybe they're the PR team, they just want to know when you have something to share. So identify your stakeholders, their types, some questions you can ask yourself. The first one is my favorite. It's usually the first ones we ask. I don't know if all companies work like Google. I assume they don't. However, something that happens very often is that you come up with an idea and then you find out there's 3 other people in 3 different offices who are working on a similar idea as yours. And I do believe in large enterprises anywhere this can happen. So do keep in mind to find out who else is working on those ideas. In a large enterprise, what you might find is that even though you had the same idea or the same vision, the perspective of the team matters. If you come up with an idea and you're part of your product org, the way you may approach this idea may be vastly different than the way a marketing team or a sales team might approach that idea. And maybe you can work together, or maybe your impact will be completely different and you don't overlap. But it's worth checking. Is it already somebody else's job? Who could be impacted by your idea in your organization? This could be good or bad impact. Who has a shared vested interest in your idea? Can they contribute and help you? And most importantly, who could shut down your idea? In the startup world, we used to call this market and competitive analysis. In the enterprise world, I call it identifying stakeholders and politics. So hopefully that's a good first step. communicating your idea. I think this is super critical. In the startup world, one thing that we're very commonly hear is stealth mode. Stealth mode, this gives you that first mover advantage that you might need to get your product to market. Well, I'd argue inside a big enterprise, you really want to communicate it a lot. And it helps you in many different ways, getting valuable feedback. If you've never done a startup and you're really interested in that field, but you're in a very large organization right now, I can't think of any better experience to just learn how to pitch, to handle objections from key stakeholders, from tweaking your message to different audiences. It's super valuable. So, definitely your pitch should improve. You'll find more stakeholders who have a shared interest, and they may introduce you to other stakeholders who can help. And your idea should change. After you've communicated it to a lot of people, if it hasn't changed, maybe take a step back and just check whether you were listening to all the stakeholders you communicated with. Just make sure. And keep an open mind on how your idea could evolve. All right, you've communicated your idea. Now it's time, and pardon some of the enterprise jargon that I'm using, building a shared vision. We're going to talk about synergy now. I got a few chuckles. Thank you. It is an enterprise-focused presentation, so why not? We're going to build a shared vision. What have we got to do? You've found your stakeholders. Now you want to find out who are the core ones, who are going to build a team with you, who are going to stay up late at night and work on these ideas. Now, there's a great saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Thank you. It's such a great quote. I share with my team. And this is the essence of the reason for this presentation, I'd say. You have to find that core group that's going to be working with you to get farther and farther and farther. But then you also have to keep in mind there are a bunch of different things that you'll have to think about when it comes to execution and planning along the way when you work together. Now, whatever the plan is that you put together as a team, it's essentially going to look like a business plan. In enterprises, we have different words. I've heard product requirements document, market requirements document. I've heard go-to-market plan. I've heard go-to-developer plan. Any other crazy ones that you've heard? No? Essentially, they're all the same thing. It's a business plan. So I'm not going to show you what a business plan looks like. There are many people in this room who can share great examples of that. But essentially, it's a business plan. And then you have to get the approval, the LGTM. That looks good to me. And what's fun about trying to get this in an enterprise is you have to get that LGTM from all the decision makers. And you don't want to forget that it's not just your management that has to say yes. It might be some of the cross-functional stakeholders that you found who also need to get approval from their management. I've seen phenomenal ideas get shot down because some other organization inside the enterprise wasn't ready to go yet, and they were a key part of the overall puzzle. So keep that in mind, and timing matters. This is a little bit different than the startup world. Enterprises run on a fiscal year. The first time, as we mentioned in the introduction earlier, I co-founded an accelerator called the Indie Games Accelerator. It's something I'm very passionate about. We've had several Pakistani indie game studios come join us in Singapore. We're bringing in studios from all around the world, connecting them with great mentors. We had this idea, this vision, a year before we actually launched it. And the problem is when we pitched it, we pitched it in February. Google has a fiscal year that runs on the calendar year. So by February, what happened to all the budget? It's allocated. Yeah, it's already allocated. It's too late. All the planning happened. So guess what? We had to shelve the idea. And we shelved it. The great thing is that the team stayed focused on it. And the moment budget planning came around for the next year, we were ready to pitch it again. And we landed the resources to make it a real thing. So that's really important. Timing really, really matters. On to chapter 2, ideas in action. This is, again, maybe a reflection of things I've learned at Google. If you see some similarities, I hope it'll be useful for you. But there's another saying that I love, and it's not by anybody at Google. Say what you'll do what you'll say, and then say what you did. It's super simple, but this is the essence of it. If you're an entrepreneur, starting up something from scratch, or you're in a large enterprise, your reputation matters so much. Keeping people up to date is so important. Delivering on your promises is so critical. And this pretty much sums it up. So when it comes to execution, you really need to think about the timelines of everyone around you. You've involved a whole bunch of other teams that have their own processes, that have their own approval timelines. And just because you got your piece done doesn't mean it's over. It means you have to now pass it on to maybe the marketing team or the PR team, and they have to run their process, and you may not know that process very well. In a small startup, I remember being able to see the entire process and understanding how long something would take. In a larger enterprise, it's difficult to know everything, and you need to rely on your team and your ability to work as a team to make sure you've accommodated for all the different time required. On communication, one critical thing. Your stakeholders and whoever gave you the LGTM should never wonder what's happening on that project. There should never be this moment where somebody in my management chain is wondering, what happened to that project somebody's working on? I'm not hearing anything. Maybe we should reallocate his budget to another project. You don't want that. So something we practice, over-communication is always better than under-communication. If you're not sure whether you're communicating enough, then you're not. Just communicate some more. But with a few caveats, communicate appropriately according to the audience. The same type of message you might share to peers may not be the same message you share to executive staff in your enterprise if you actually want them to read it. So think about how you're going to communicate. Also, make sure it's either you or somebody you trust who is the central spokesperson for your idea or your project. If you're not the one talking about it, somebody else is, and if it's not somebody you trust, you don't know how your idea might be being described or being pitched to critical decision makers across the enterprise. So make sure that you're established, or somebody you trust is established as the key spokesperson for the project. All right, I'm running low on time, so I'm just going to run through a few more slides here. Very critical is bringing folks along for the ride. Your stakeholders are a core part of your team. They should also co-own the program or the project or the product, and they should also co-own responsibility. Involve them in problem solving. You shouldn't be the only one staying up at night stressed out about your idea. That's what your stakeholders are for as well. Make them part of the story. And when I say make them part of the story, that also means make sure you give them credit. Just because it was your idea doesn't mean that you get all the limelight. In a big enterprise, something I've learned is sharing credit goes a long, long way. And insist that other people be champions of your program or your idea or your product or whatever it is. And it also helps reemphasize that ownership and responsibility. And another great line that I've heard, a rising tide lifts everyone, all boats, absolutely. A rising tide lifts all boats. And when it comes to big enterprises, try to build a reputation of being a rising tide. It's more likely that the next time you have a big idea, people are going to come back and invest in you. Same world as the startup world. Very similar, in my experience at least. So last chapter on legacies and failures. Just know when to retire. Things are going really good, great, but founderitis is as real a thing in the startup world as it is in enterprises. And founderitis is that horrible moment when the founder has built this beautiful thing and their obsession with their baby, their product, their idea, ends up being the thing that kills it. their unwillingness to let go. Learn to sit in the passenger seat. Find great talent to take over. Go on, build more ideas. Hold the map for them, but allow your idea to become bigger than you. And sometimes we fail. And if you fail, don't get frustrated, get feedback. There are incredibly easy ways to end your career in a large enterprise. And getting angry and cursing everyone who didn't support you on that big idea you really wanted to make happen is one of those wonderful ways you can find yourself at the doorstep. So take the lesson, take some feedback, try again. I have no doubt that you can be successful in this. That's it. It's short and sweet, I hope. Here's a recap in case you wanted to hear or just take a quick photo. I saw some phones. That's the overall message to share. I hope it was helpful. I did get some feedback within Google that this was helpful to a few other teams, and I try to practice this as much as I can. So with that, I do want to once again congratulate the team at Nest.io and Jahan for making an idea into such an incredible reality. I believe many of you are going to be able to get your ideas off the ground. If you're interested in the images in the slides, check out this video that we featured at Google I/O a few years ago called The Story of an Idea. Please connect with me at Sami Kiz. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.